On a freezing December morning in 1849, a group of prisoners stood in a snowy square in St. Petersburg. They were tied, blindfolded, facing a firing squad. Among them was a young writer. His name was Fyodor Dostoevsky. At the time, he was not yet the literary giant the world would come to know. He was simply a man accused of political crimes. Dostoevsky had joined a discussion group known as the Petrashevsky Circle. The members met to talk about philosophy, social reform, and the future of Russia. But in the eyes of the Tsar, even discussion was dangerous. In April 1849, Dostoevsky and others were arrested. They were imprisoned for months, interrogated, kept in uncertainty. Finally, they were sentenced to death. On December 22nd, the prisoners were taken to Semyonovsky Square. The air was bitterly cold. Snow covered the ground. Soldiers lined up, rifles ready. The prisoners were dressed in white burial shirts. They were told their sentence would be carried out immediately. Dostoevsky watched as the first group of prisoners was tied to posts. He believed his final moments had arrived. Witnesses later described how calm he appeared, almost reflective. He reportedly turned to another prisoner and said that within minutes, they would be with Christ. The command was given. The rifles were raised. And then a messenger on horseback arrived. A decree from the Tsar. The execution was stopped. It had all been staged. The death sentence was commuted at the last possible moment. Instead of execution, Dostoevsky would face years of hard labor in Siberia. The shock of those final minutes, believing death was certain, changed him forever. He would later describe the experience as the most profound moment of his life. After the mock execution, he was sent to a prison camp in Siberia for 4 years. Conditions were brutal. He lived among criminals, murderers, thieves, men hardened by suffering. He slept in overcrowded barracks, worked in freezing temperatures, endured humiliation and illness. But something unexpected happened during those years. Instead of breaking him, the suffering transformed him. He began to observe human nature more deeply. He saw guilt, redemption, cruelty, and compassion in their rawest forms. When he finally returned from exile, he was no longer the same man. His writing changed. His later novels would explore themes of morality, free will, faith and psychological torment, crime and punishment. The Idiot, The Brothers Karamazov. These works were shaped by the shadow of that execution. Mourning, Dostoevsky often reflected on how close he had come to death. He wrote that in those final minutes, life suddenly felt infinitely precious. Every second mattered. Every breath was a gift. The staged execution, intended to terrify and humiliate, instead gave him a new perspective on existence itself. Historians still debate whether the Tsar intended the mock execution as psychological punishment from the beginning. What is certain is that it worked. The experience left deep emotional scars. Dostoevsky later suffered from epilepsy and intense anxiety. Yet without that near-death moment, the world might never have received the masterpieces he went on to write. On that freezing December morning, a young writer stood before a firing squad. He believed he was about to die. Instead, he was given a second life. And that second life changed literature forever. Few writers can say they stared into death's eyes and returned, but Dostoevsky did. And in doing so, he transformed his suffering into stories that still echo through the world today.